Hello and welcome to Washington Talk. I'm Eun-jung Cho. North Korea test-fired an intercontinental ballistic missile that can reach the United States after warning military responses to the U.S. strengthening its regional security presence. Earlier, U.S. President Joe Biden met with the leaders of South Korea and Japan and reaffirmed U.S. commitment to further reinforce extended deterrence to the allies. On the program today, we have Ambassador Harry Harris joining us via Skype and Mr. Christopher Johnstone in the studio with me to discuss the results of this series of summits in Asia.
We strongly condemn these actions, and we again call for North Korea to stop further unlawful, destabilizing acts.
북한은 핵과 미사일 능력에 대한 자신감을 토대로 한층 더 적대적이고 공세적인 도발을 감행하고 있습니다.
I made it clear to President Xi Jinping that I thought they had an obligation to attempt to make it clear to North Korea.
Now joining us via Skype, Ambassador Harry Harris, former U.S. Ambassador to South Korea. Admiral Harris was the commander of the U.S. Pacific Command, commander of the U.S. Pacific Fleet, assistant to the chairman of the Joint Chief of Staff, and commander of the U.S. Sixth Fleet. In the studio with me, Mr. Christopher Johnstone, Senior Advisor and Japan Chair at the Center for Strategic and International Studies. Mr. Johnstone was the Director for East Asia at the National Security Council under President Biden until June of this year. He also served as the Director for Japan and Oceanian Affairs at the NSC. Welcome to the program.
Thank you.
Ambassador Harris, welcome.
Hey, good morning.
Ambassador Harris, North Korea immediately reacted to the trilateral summit between U.S., ROK, and Japan and fired missiles, including an intercontinental ballistic missile. How serious is this firing of an Icbm, which looks like a success? Also, North Korean Foreign Minister Choi Sun-hee said that if the U.S. tries to bolster extended deterrence, North Korea will make military countermeasures in direct proportion to it. Does North Korea have the ability to increase military action in direct proportion to the Allied posture?
It is very serious, even though it is just another test in a long running series of missile tests over the past year, especially this year. But it is significant in that the North Koreans are trying to send a signal to the United States and to South Korea and Japan, coming on the heels of the East Asia Summit. Regarding Choi Sun-hee's comments, what North Korea is doing is something that would not happen without North Korea's provocations, and that's bringing together the U.S., South Korea, and Japanese trilateral relationship. She's bringing South Korea and Japan closer together than ever before because of the provocations from North Korea. So in that regard, this is North Korea is its own worst enemy in that the things that it seeks to divide, that is the U.S.-South Korea alliance and the South Korea-Japan relationship, those things are being brought together by North Korea's provocations.
Now, Mr. Johnstone, the Icbm landed just 130 miles off of Japan. How serious is this?
Well, it's very serious from Tokyo's perspective. And I think what you'll see, just as Ambassador Harris said, and I fully agree, the effect of this will be to bring the three countries, the three allies, even closer together. I'm sure that Tokyo, Seoul, Washington have planned a response to this kind of activity. I'm sure that we'll see some manifestation of increased resolve from the three, whether it's in the form of new joint exercises, deployments of strategic capabilities such as bombers to the area, to things like enhancements to U.S. force posture in the region. I'm sure that the allies are ready for this. And that there will be some form of demonstration of our ability to respond.
Right. You did lay out a few aspects that we could expect as a bolstered extended deterrence. President Biden said that if North Korea engages in long-range tests, we would have to take certain actions that would be more defensive. Now, you did lay out some of the measures that could be taken, but what do you think he's meaning by taking certain actions?
Well, I think he's making the point that as we have an obligation to defend ourselves and to take steps to be able to protect our own security and to defend the security of our allies. And so there are a range of ways that we can signal our intent to do that. As I said, the allies, there's a very well-oiled machine in which the allies plan responses to these sorts of activities. And so I think you will see some demonstration of the allies coming closer together. Another option may be to operate in different locations. So some of our resolve is demonstrated with exercises, with capabilities, but also operating in new locations that could be something that North Korea doesn't anticipate. So without speculating too much, there's a whole menu of options that the allies could draw from. That would send a very strong signal of how we're coming together.
Now, Ambassador Harris, in 2003, under Defense Secretary Donald Rumsfeld, Plan 5030 was designed to drain North Korea's limited resources. And we've seen North Korea firing barrage of missiles and flying warplanes near the border in the last couple of months. Is North Korea currently staging military provocations that is not sustainable?
I think that it's not sustainable by North Korea's capabilities of themselves. But as long as the PRC, China, and Russia are willing to violate United Nations sanctions and support the regime in North Korea, then it will continue to do these provocations and will continue to have the resources to do it. I think it's clear that Kim Jong-un is willing to allow his own people to suffer and as he uses his limited resources to improve his ballistic missile and nuclear capabilities. So in that regard, I think that the PRC has the largest lever to apply to this problem set, but they are unwilling to apply that lever, and therefore we will see an increase in tensions throughout the region that could affect the PRC as well.
So of course, obviously, China is not doing anything to rein in North Korea at the moment. Do you think China and Russia is somehow instigating North Korea with these provocations?
Well, it's a chicken or the egg thing, right? I don't know if they're instigating North Korea or if North Korea is acting of its own volition because it has the resources to do so. I'm not sure that really matters. As a State Department spokesman said just the day before yesterday, the Chinese have an obligation and an interest in seeing North Korea's behaviors curbed. But whether they're willing to act on that interest and their international obligations remains to be seen.
Ambassador Harris, when you were ambassador to South Korea, you know everything about U.S. Forces Korea, and then you were commander to Indo-PACOM. So do you think the current level of U.S. forces in Korea, 28,500, is an appropriate level?
I do think it is an appropriate level. I mean, remember that if the armistice is broken and the North invades the South, U.S. will come to South Korea's aid from all across the region, including Carrier Strike Group in Japan, Air Force Fighter Wings in Japan, as well as from the United States itself. So the forces that are in Korea are adequate for the mission that they are assigned today. The commander in Korea will become the Combined Forces Command commander and will be supported by Indo-PACOM and others if the armistice is broken. That's why bilateral training between the United States and South Korean forces is so critical. And I'm glad that we're back to a robust level of training and engagement between our forces on the peninsula.
Mr. Johnstone, the three leaders also agreed to share DPRK's missile warning data in real time. How would this drastically improve the three countries' capabilities to detect and interject North Korean missiles? And we already have similar agreements like the Trilateral Information Sharing Agreement, the TISA, and then also GSOMIA between Japan and South Korea. And how is the new agreement different from the previous ones?
Yeah, this is a significant step and sends a very powerful message, again, about the three countries coming closer together. And just as you said, this commitment to share missile warning data is made possible by the fact that there's a GSOMIA between Japan and South Korea. Today, the way we share missile warning, missile tracking data is almost entirely bilateral. The US and the ROK, the US and Japan. There's no real existing mechanism in real time during an actual contingency to share that data together. So this is a statement of intent. It will take some time as a technical matter to truly enable this capability, but it's a significant step forward. I would also say it's too early to talk about an integrated missile defense architecture in East Asia, politically sensitive topic in both countries. However, the first step toward creating such an architecture would be a step like this, creating a real-time information sharing missile warning system that the three countries are able to share and have a common picture of the threat. So in that sense, it's significant. It's a first initial step, potentially, down this road.
So GSOMIA, even though Japan and South Korea has it, the UN government wants to normalize it and revitalize it to more full-fledged. Do you think having this new agreement, are we on the way to normalize GSOMIA more?
Yes, I think it is a way to sort of normalize, routinize the information sharing between our three countries. And as I said, though, it's a significant new dimension of information sharing. This concept of real-time missile warning data, very significant, and kind of once realized, crosses a new threshold in our cooperation together.
Ambassador Harris, Mr. Johnstone said that it is too early to say that we're now heading towards integrated missile defense system. What is your take? Some people say the latest agreement of real-time missile warning data is like a down payment to the integrated missile defense, that this is the first stage into that direction. What is your take? And why do you think South Korea should be joining the integrated missile defense with the United States?
Well, I mean, it's a beginning, right? You have to start from somewhere. And as Mr. Johnston said, we're not at the integrated air and missile defense architecture linking Japan, South Korea, and the United States together yet. But you have to start somewhere. So, we don't have to have a new agreement. GSOMIA allows this sort of thing to be a part of it. But what the two countries are moving toward, and what President Yoon indicated, is to add this level of missile warning into the things that the GSOMIA construct allows. So it's an essential step for this instantaneous, continuous, autonomous missile warning system. That we need to build, I believe, between South Korea, Japan, and the United States for Northeast Asia.
Ambassador, do you think eventually South Korea needs to join integrated missile defense system with the United States?
I do, and I think that Japan and South Korea needs to join together in this because Kim Jong-un's missiles point in every direction.
Mr. Johnstone, leaders of South Korea and Japan reaffirmed their commitment to swift resolution of wartime labor issues. Based on your experience in the government. Why do you think Japan and South Korea should put aside historical issues and beef up more security cooperation among the bilateral two of them and then with the United States trilaterally?
Yeah, one of the things I've been particularly pleased about in the last several months, and particularly since the Yoon administration took office, is the steady rhythm of trilateral meetings between officials from Tokyo, Seoul, and Washington at all levels. So including at the leader level, but national security advisors, secretaries of state and foreign ministers, defense ministers, lower level officials. Almost a week doesn't go by without a trilateral meeting. And I think that is very heartening to see the practical cooperation take place. We saw that with some of the military exercises, but also significant in the joint statement that was announced in Phnom Penh is the expansion of this agenda, this trilateral agenda, into new areas, including things like economic security. There was an announcement that the three would begin to cooperate in that field as well. So that's all very positive. I do think at the end of the day, it will be important to resolve these history issues. They do hang in the background. They do serve as a constraint on how far officials in Tokyo and Seoul are prepared to go. So while it's great to see the cooperation take place in a practical sense, I do also hope that in the weeks and months ahead, we're able to achieve some resolution of these history issues as well.
Well, now I want to look at the China dimension in all of this, in this summitry. Now, Ambassador Harris, after their three-way summit, and then as well as in their bilateral summits, the United States, South Korea, and Japan all told President Xi to play a more constructive role in reining in North Korea. However, China didn't mention the word North Korea at all in their recapping of the meetings. Why do you think China is silent about this issue?
Well, I mean, I don't know. I mean, you'd have to ask China, but I suspect that it's due to what I spoke about earlier. China is enabling North Korea. North Korea is a formal ally of China. So that is probably the reason that North Korea was not mentioned by name. But again, North Korea or China is enabling North Korea and permitting the North Koreans' provocative behavior, which is destabilizing to the entire region, including China.
Mr. Johnstone, what is your take? And also President Xi, while meeting with these three countries, do you think now he will be more proactive in terms of reining in North Korea?
I'll be honest that I'm not optimistic. I know that the White House was pretty disappointed in President Xi's response to the president on this issue of North Korea. No particular indication that Xi recognizes the role that China needs to play, the obligation China has to play in restraining North Korean behavior. So the messages that we talked about earlier about Jake Sullivan's message, the president's message, also very much aimed at China as well. That absent efforts to restrain North Korea and to prevent these kinds of provocations, the region will come together in ways, and the allies will come together in ways that China may not like, but are necessary because of the threat picture that has emerged that China is standing by and allowing to happen. So unfortunately, I'm not optimistic, but I am confident that as allies, we'll come together and demonstrate the resolve needed to continue to deal with this threat.
Mr. Johnstone, what do you think about the trilateral message regarding Taiwan? The three leaders said that they emphasized the importance of keeping peace and stability in the Taiwan Strait. How strong a message is this to China? And also more broadly, just these three countries coming together and coming up with this comprehensive Phnom Penh statement. What is the message to China?
I think it's a very powerful message. What's significant about this statement is it takes our cooperation as allies beyond just dealing with the North Korea problem. This is a statement related to our cooperation in the Indo-Pacific. So it indicates that our cooperation has a much larger basis, a much larger focus. So a very powerful message, I think, about common values, common purpose from a regional perspective between Tokyo, Seoul, and Washington. On the Taiwan question in particular, in some sense, it wasn't new language. In the joint statement that President Biden and President Yoon had in May, also had Taiwan Strait language. So did the joint statement in May with Biden and Kishida. But coming together trilaterally to state our shared interest in peace and stability in the Taiwan Strait sends the message to China that this is not an internal China issue, it's not a US-China issue, it's a regional issue. And the region as a whole has an interest in peace and stability. I think that's a powerful message.
Now, Ambassador Harris, when President Biden talked about the possibility of increasing military presence in Asia in response to North Korean actions, but he also said this is in the face of China. So do you think U.S. forces Korea or U.S. forces Japan in emergency, in contingency situations can be deployed to Taiwan emergency?
Yeah, every country acts in its own self-interest and defends itself as it sees fit. So, but the question of whether we would defend Taiwan or not remains an open question. Even though President Biden has said 4 times since he took office that the United States would defend Taiwan, that has been walked back in every instance by some entity in Washington. And we come down to the position that we retain the strategic ambiguity with regard to the defense of Taiwan. We support the one China policy and all the rest. But the United States reserves the right to deploy its forces in its national interest, as every country does.
Reserves its right so it can deploy when necessary.
Absolutely.
Ambassador Harris, some people in South Korea criticize President Yoon Suk-yeol's latest summitry as diminishing the space for diplomacy with China. What stance do you think Seoul should take between Beijing and Washington?
Well, I mean, every country has the inherent right of self-defense. That's the primary mission of any government, is to defend its country and its people. South Korea faces an enormous threat from the north. I believe, and I've said this before, that Kim Jong-un seeks 4 things. He seeks sanctions relief. He wants to keep his nuclear weapons. He wants to split the alliance, and he wants to dominate the peninsula in a manner of his choosing. That threat to South Korea is being enabled by China. So the president of South Korea, President Yoon, has to weigh that in his relationships with China and Russia and with other countries. So his relationship with China, a country that is enabling North Korea to threaten the very existence of South Korea, has to be weighed in his dealings with Xi Jinping, and I think it is.
Mr. Johnstone, before we go, President Yoon is increasingly aligning with the United States. Then why do you think China, President Xi Jinping, agreed to meet with President Yoon Suk-yeol? And does this show that South Korea should speak up to China when necessary?
Yeah, I think it shows that it's in China's interest, too, to have a relationship with South Korea. Look, I think the lesson as we look around the region and elsewhere in the world is that pushing back on bullying from China works. The lesson of Japan in 2010, when the Chinese cut off exports of rare earth metals. The lesson of Australia, which experienced various forms of economic coercion in the last few years from China as a result of some of Australia's positions taken against China. Ultimately, both Japan and Australia were successful in diversifying their supply chains, obtaining alternative sources of the things that China attempted to use to coerce them. And in the end, were successful in pushing back. So I think that's a model for Korea as well. Pushing back works. And at the end of the day, it's in China's interest to have a relationship with South Korea as well.
Well, that's all the time we have for today. Mr. Johnstone, Ambassador Harris, thank you for joining us.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Joe.
And thank you for watching. We'll be back here next week with U.S. experts to discuss the 2 Koreas and the region right here from Washington.